Everyone, I am Anjali Tyagi and we are going to discuss about the life of William Shakespeare. As you all know, the name of William Shakespeare has a household word with the students of English literature and lovers of drama the world over. The little-known life story of this greatest dramatist is replete with speculations. Despite great labor that has gone into discovering the complete life history of the most eminent literature, the material we have got is still as insufficient as it is uncertain. People therefore have to move in the guess world. There are many perhaps and possibilities out of which a structure of his life is erected. We have this observation from the Cambridge History of English Literature. Shakespeare has come to be seen a special case of mystery. We know nothing about many of his contemporaries. For example, Kidd, the author of the most popular tragedy of the Daisy, we know almost nothing till recently about the death of the celebrated person like Marlowe. Many legends have been woven around his personality. Those who love him are not ready to hear some of the most glaring black spots on his character. On the contrary, many critics have wasted their lives running after him, so much so that even his very name is questioned. Some of the modern researchers in the United States of America believe that it was Christopher Marlowe, when involved in a murder case, had to remain underground for a number of years and didn't like to reveal his identity for security reasons, who actually wrote these plays. There are still others who declare that 4 or 5 persons wrote the plays under the imaginary name Shakespeare. Whatever be the facts about the dramatist, it is certain that we cannot ignore the age in which he was born and also his contemporaries. We sincerely wish to inform and enlighten ourselves about the poet William Shakespeare. Let's remember that the word poet was an Elizabethan term for a playwright. Although Shakespeare didn't mention it either in his will or when called upon to describe his status in the court of request, when giving evidence there in 1912, he was without the least doubt a member of the famous company of actors who are best known as the King's Men, and he was also their principal dramatist. Shakespeare described himself simply a gentleman of Stratford-on-Avon. Now, there are 3 stages of Shakespeare's life. First stage is life at Stratford-on-Avon, second one is life in London, and the last stage of his life was life again at Stratford-on-Avon. Now we shall briefly take a look at the life of William Shakespeare. So let's start from the life at Stratford-on-Avon. First of all, birth of William Shakespeare. A contemporary of Shakespeare, M. Drayton, calls Warwickshire the heart of England. The country around Stratford-on-Avon was site of Avon and sweet woodlands. In Shakespeare's days, the town numbered about 1400 inhabitants. Floods and fires were the main dangers. The kite and Severn Raven often became angry in autumn, and it was born on or about 23rd April 1564. Professor Dowden also not certain upon what day Shakespeare was born, but he was baptized on April 26, 1564 is certain. Now his parentage. His grandfather's name was Richard, that of his father's dealer in hides, gloves, corn, wood, etc. was John. He was a prosperous statesman of the town who later became its justice of the peace and high bailiff of Mayo. The poet's mother was Mary Arden. He had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. The family had some small landed property through Mary Arden, and at one time prosperous and at others not. The poet's mother, Mary Arden, was his father's landlord's daughter. The Ardens were Warwickshire gentry since the conquest and had been holding places of distinction in the household of Henry VII. First 2 children's girls of John and Mary Shakespeare died in their infancy. The third, William, their first son, braved the plague and survived. Then they had a daughter, another daughter who died early, and 3 sons, Gilbert, Richard and Edmund. But John Shakespeare suffered a setback in his business and became bankrupt. He had to mortgage his wife's estate and live a life of obscurity. During the later years of his life, he had fortune on his side and became free from financial embarrassment. It has been rightly assumed that his son William Shakespeare, during his stay in London, rendered him financial assistance. Towards the end of 16th century, he became fairly affluent with the restoration of his family fortunes. The sunset of his life was crowned with honor when he was granted a coat of arms. He died in 1601 and was buried at Stratford. Now take a look at Shakespeare's education. Professor Hudson writes, though there is no actual record of the fact, it is practically certain that like the Stratford boys of his class, he went to the local grammar school, an excellent institution of its kind, where he was taught Latin and arithmetic, and perhaps a little Greek, according to Dowden. Whatever education Shakespeare received, his school career came to an abrupt and untimely, probably because of the decline of his father's financial fortune. He assisted his father in his trade about the imagination faculty of the boy Shakespeare. Shakespeare's marriage. The poet's early marriage was a very significant fact in his life. It is on record that in November 1582, the Bishop of Worcestershire granted a license for the marriage of William Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway. Now, the second stage of Shakespeare's life is life in London. Circumstances leading to Shakespeare's departure from Stratford. Tradition has it that Shakespeare left Stratford for London in 1585, 1587 or 1586, perhaps in consequence of a deer stealing prank in the neighbouring park of Sir Thomas Lucy of Charlecote. William Shakespeare left Stratford for London, and there is no doubt or dispute about it, but the exact year of his departure is uncertain. Similarly, there are conjectures about his reasons for leaving Stratford. There are a number of reasons given for this. First reason is his marriage with Anne Hathaway, 8 years his senior, might have made him feel uncomfortable among the people of Stratford. Second one is the liability of a wife older than himself and 3 children at the early age of 21 years. An impoverished household might have been a compelling circumstance. Third is the prospects of a better life at Stratford, especially when his father's state was passing through a very lean period, seemed bleak. And fourth one is his complicity in deer stealing from the park of Sir Thomas Lucy might also be a cause to leave Stratford for some time to avoid trouble. Now take a look at Shakespeare in London. Again, many conjectures have been made about what Shakespeare did after coming to London. Initially, he must have made a very precarious living by doing odd jobs. It is said that he found only a mean employment, that he was a schoolmaster, that he was a holder of horses at the doors of the theatres, that he was a clerk in a lawyer's office, that he was prompter's assistant, etc. Shakespeare could not be all this is certain. But whatever Shakespeare did for a living initially, it is certain that he ultimately gained a secure and rewarding footing within the theatre and made great strides to become the wonder of the Elizabethan stage. At this time, the drama was gaining rapidly in popularity, though the work of university wits. William Shakespeare's roles as actor and playwright are worthy of note. It is on record that William Shakespeare was a handsome, well-shaped man, very good company, and of a very ready and pleasant, smooth wit. He was regarded chiefly as a successful member of his own class, a prosperous actor dramatist whose energy and skill were given to the business of the theatre and the amusement of the theatre-going public. Shakespeare's early days in London must have been alive with novelty and excitement, yielding him the richest part of his harvest of observations. He was connected soon after the middle of the last decade of the 16th century with different theatres as shareholder, and by 1597 could buy a good house, new place at Stratford, where he afterwards enlarged his property. Now come to prosperity and fame. Ben Jonson, calling Shakespeare the sweet son of Avon, praises him our Lord. It is recorded in the accounts of the treasures of the chamber that as a member of the Lord Chamberlain's company, Shakespeare appeared twice before Queen Elizabeth in 1594. He was now writing historical plays and earlier comedies and was gathering enormous wealth. A letter still exists in which Shakespeare's fame and interest in his country home are recognized. Shakespeare now has acquired property both at Stratford and London. Now let's discuss his family conditions. John Shakespeare, the dramatist's father, died in 1601. Shakespeare was now a shareholder of the Globe Theatre. Queen Elizabeth died on 1603. Shakespeare bothered to write a single line about it. When Elizabeth's successor James first arrived in London, he issued a warrant licensing the theatrical company to which Shakespeare belonged. His name appears second in the list of players contained in the warrant. He again acted in Ben Jonson's play. Then, leaving the stage, Shakespeare returned to Stratford on June 5, 1607. His eldest daughter Susanna was married to Mr. John Hall. That very year, the youngest brother Edward died in September 1608. His mother followed her husband to the grave. On February 21, 1608, was baptized, a daughter of John and Susanna Hall. Now, third stage of his life is life again at Stratford. Prospero's farewell to magic in The Tempest is symbolic of Shakespeare's farewell to the stage. On account of name and fame and money, Shakespeare was respected by his fellow men. The atmosphere in Stratford, in comparison to that in London, was peaceful. Still, he had not lost interest in London. In 1613, he bought a house near Blackfriars Theatre. In 1612, his brother Richard also passed away. After the death of his only son Hamlet, Shakespeare had been keeping indifferent health. The end came on April 23rd, 1616, the day of his birth. He was exactly 52 years old. The only report as to the cause of his death is in the diary printed in 1839 of John Ward, that Shakespeare, Drayton and Ben Jonson had an eerie meeting, and it seems they drank too hard, for Shakespeare died of a fever there contracted. Shakespeare left his property to his daughter Judith, sister John, his godson, friend, and some of his fellow players. His body was laid to rest in the parish church of Stratford on Avon. Now take a look at his works. Shakespeare's works consist of non-dramatic poems and dramatic works. In non-dramatic poems, Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece, a body of 154 sonnets, and a very few shorter pieces, somewhat more doubtfully genuine. In his dramatic works, it is about 20 times as much as the non-dramatic one. It is divided into 37 plays, which first appeared in the first folio edition of 1623, 7 years after the death of Shakespeare. It was published by his friends Hemming and Cesdale, and classed as tragedies, comedies and histories. This edition doesn't contain pericles. The second folio edition of 1632 was a mere reprint of the first edition. During Shakespeare's lifetime, only a few of his plays had been printed in quartos of doubtful authenticity. On the other hand, the poems Venus and Adonis, The Rape of Lucrece and the sonnets appeared in print with their author William Shakespeare's name, and most certainly under his superintendence. There is great uncertainty about the date of most of the plays. The dates ascribed to each are conjectural because it is not easy to place them in an exact chronological order. There was no attempt to arrange the plays in a chronological order. They were classified according to their genres, but this inadequacy was greatly felt, and so the distinguished Shakespearean scholars like E.K. Chambers and Sir Sidney Lee have taken great pains to determine their dates of composition approximately. That's all about Shakespeare's life, and we will continue about his works in detail in the next video. Thanks and take care.